Hey everybody, so this is what I do. I edit audio. So the first step I usually do is play the song, and in this case it's Desert Rose by Sting. And I was editing this for a friend, trying to figure out what kind of program she wanted. It had to be 2 minutes and 10 seconds, give or take a couple. So the first section I started with was the very beginning. Um, Generally, I will go into extreme mode just so I can see everything, and I will also zoom in. So I chose to ignore the very beginning and fade it in, and then let the first few beats roll out. And here I noticed that I could blend in the next part where the girl comes in and starts singing again with that current part because they have the same beats. So I faded in the second piece and faded out the first piece so that they overlap. So it ends up sounding like that. And then the next, for that one, I let it go a lot longer, and it goes through the first verse up till he starts singing the chorus. And as he sings the chorus, the part I wanted to bring in was from the second chorus in the song, so I used that, and I faded out the LA LA in the first chorus and blended in the second LA LA, so there are two going at the same time. And then the following piece, it goes into a vocalization instrumental piece, and I brought in a part from the other instrumental part of that piece because there's a huge gap where nothing's really happening in the music, and it makes it hard for a program to actually have that big gap because you can't really do much choreography wise there. So I faded out that part and faded in the next part. And then there's also a cut in the middle of that where it's a little obvious and I'm not thrilled with it, but I usually cut it so that there's a crossfade there so it doesn't sound as tragic. And then I use the same spot I used earlier on the LA LA coming in because that generally is the easiest spot in the song to really crossfade things. And the next part I used, I just ended the song where it actually ends, but just made the end fade out much shorter and overlapped them. So it sounded different and made for a more interesting ending that didn't take the 20 or 30 seconds it normally does. Overall, one of the longer ones that I've had to do recently, there's a lot of fades that go into it and a lot of crossfades. If I zoom in on the audio 3 piece, oops. You can see right in the middle of the piece that there's a crossfade so that it's not completely sounding as choppy as it normally would. But I do tend to use a lot of regular fades, and most of the time I'm working in the Smart Tool just because for what I'm doing it's a lot easier, but frequently I'll go to the selector tool if I'm trying to get something really specific. But for the most part I leave it on the Smart Tool just so I can do fades a lot more quickly, so I can do things like this as opposed to having to go in and do it all the time. But occasionally I will use the shortcuts as well. It just kind of depends on what I'm working on and what kind of editing session I'm having, because if it's one that's going to take me longer, I generally will use the Smart Tool just because it's already taking me a while anyway. This particular piece has 14 fades if I'm not mistaken, and at least 8 different cuts in it. And the entire song as a whole is almost a 5-minute long song that I had to cut down to 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Another great example of stuff I've had to cut down that was really long is not that one. Is this particular one. It's a song by Sarah Brightman. The song is 6 minutes long or close to it, and the program could only be 2 minutes long because of time restraints. It could only be a maximum of 2:10, but one of the coaches wanted it only 2 minutes long, so it wasn't as long of a program for their student. So I used the very beginning of the song, which in and of itself is up through the first chorus is almost a minute just by itself. So I used a sync point to be able to mix where I wanted and mixed where the choruses come in, because they do come in the same way every chorus. It has a very big blank spot. It has just a little instrumental part, and then it has this very big swell, and I overlapped the swells so that they came in at the same time. So I used a fade on both ends so that they came in together but didn't overlap one another, so they sounded correctly. And at the end, I ended up using the actual ending of the song, or it's the actual ending of the song, and that whole ending part is really long by itself. So I faded in the end chorus and the very end piece actually had similar sounding patterns, so I ended up just using those and overlapping them so that they blended in together and ended on a better note and had a distinct ending, whereas had I ended it where the chorus was, it wouldn't have had such a good ending. So generally that is what I do. For the most part, stuff is not too bad. Like, other stuff I've had to do is beat my group for the skating show, skating to the Beach Boys. So, as you can see here, they're skating to a combination of Kokomo and Surfing USA, and frequently with stuff like this, I'm having to match up different aspects of the chorus and different aspects of the song itself so that they blend properly, and you have to put crossfades in, otherwise it'll clip funky and it'll sound really choppy, and you'll really notice it too, especially if you're listening for it. And in my rank, this mixer we use is horrible, so it's especially noticeable if it's really bad. So here is what my crossfade looks like, and when I'm doing crossfades and cuts, I will generally go down to the sample level because it is much easier to find where I want to base my cut in, but I'm also doing it just by listening to it as well, because if I'm not listening to the background instruments as well as just the vocals, then I'm gonna miss certain things that'll overlap. And a lot of times songs don't have the same background instruments in every chorus or every section, so you have to be really careful of what those background instruments are doing, or it can make your cut sound even worse than it possibly could. So, yeah, that's what I do. Thanks for listening. Bye.